Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our Denison webinar, Organizational Transformation with Blue Cross and Blue Shield of North Carolina. My name is Tim Coupler. I'm the president of Denison Consulting and your host for today's webinar. We're very happy to have Fara Palumbo here with us today from Blue Cross and Blue Shield of North Carolina. So quickly, before we get started, let's go over a couple technical things. We will present for about 40 minutes, and the rest of the time will be used for questions sent in by our audience. On the right side of your screen, you'll see your control panel that you can use to send in your questions. We ask that you please send in your questions throughout the presentation rather than waiting for the end. This gives us time to organize them and make the most of our question and answer session. I also want to let everyone know that a copy of today's webinar and the PowerPoint slides will be archived on our website if you'd like to view them again. We'll email all of you once they are available, so please spread the word if you like this webinar. Now to get started, I'd like to introduce you to our speaker today. Fara Palumbo is the Senior Vice President and Chief Human Resources Officer of Blue Cross and Blue Shield of North Carolina. She is responsible for aligning the company's human resources strategy with its business strategy and culture. She also provides senior leadership on the company's corporate university, which has won national recognition by the American Society of Training and Development. And now I'd like to turn the microphone over to Fara to get us started.
Thanks, Tim. I really appreciate you all being here with us today. Well, let me get started by telling you a little bit about Blue Cross Blue Shield North Carolina. We are a not-for-profit, fully taxed licensee of the Blue Cross Blue Shield Association. We're headquartered in Chapel Hill, and we have major operations in a few areas of the state, including Durham and Winston-Salem. We have about 4,300 employees and serve about right under 4 million customers. We have a significant number of accreditations, both from a business perspective as an employer of choice in the area. Let me first talk a little bit about the challenges that we're all facing in this industry. Change really isn't a new story for any of us. Many industries have gone through it and actually still are. Our challenge, what I describe this as, is a perfect storm. We've had healthcare reform, we've had continually rising healthcare costs, and what I would call a down economy. We realized at the time that we very much had to embark on a significant and rapid change to continue as a successful company. But in addition to what was happening externally, internally we were also experiencing significant change. In 2010, we had a new CEO appointed. We had a senior leadership team that consisted of about 9 people, most of which had been in their role for less than 3 years. In fact, 2 of them were external hires from different industries. So in light of all this, we very much recognize the need to redefine our business strategy in order to continue the success that we had been having and continue that into the future. So when we sat down to really work through our future, we worked on a new corporate strategy, vision, and mission for the company. And I would say pretty much our mission remains relatively stable, but our new vision to be a leader in improving the healthcare system in North Carolina required us to think about what we were doing as a business slightly differently. So our CEO championed the new vision because it really keeps us focused on our market in North Carolina and speaks to the work that we need to do alongside others in healthcare, our partners in the provider system, as an example, to make the system work better for North Carolinians. And our enterprise strategies are focused on the specific actions that we believe define the highest priority of work across the enterprise for delivering on that direction in the next 5 years. So what I would say is, in addition to all of that, when you look at our strategies, what was great was that as a senior team, we focused on the need to work on our culture and our workforce. So as the senior HR person for the organization, it was gratifying to have the work that we do and the recognition of the importance of culture and workforce recognized in this very public way. And frankly, you know, if we truly want to succeed as an organization and we didn't address the culture, I'm not sure that we could actually change for the better for the future. And what you see here is a quote that I love: if you don't manage the culture, it manages you, and you may not even be aware of the extent to which this is happening. And that is so true in most organizations, and we recognize it's happening here. So in the work that we began doing from a strategic perspective, we felt that it was important to continue to evaluate and assess the engagement of our employees, but formally assess the culture of the organization. And it was very easy for us to sort of take a step back and say, we're the leadership team, so we know what the culture is. And the fact of the matter is, it's much more important to ask everyone in the organization what they believe the culture is and what they would like to see the culture become in the future. And for us, there were a few key requirements in making sure that we could do that and do that effectively. One was cost. The second was minimizing the participant survey time. And the third, and what I would say almost most important, was to be able to deliver results about what the information was in a very quick, easy to understand way so that we could actually have influence on the development of the strategy. We have been doing surveys for employee engagement, I'd say for at least 10 years, if not more than that. And when we did these surveys in the past, we were very focused on employee preferences versus satisfaction. And at the time, we were doing a lot of work about employment brands. So what is it that we need to know to help us build an employment brand to compete in this market? We also, in the surveys, focused more on the leader. So it was much more individualized information that we spent a lot of time on as opposed to the organizational information. In the future, and at least for the next few years, we felt that it was important to continually assess the culture, and in doing so, help us to identify those entrenched behaviors and have an impact on those behaviors so that we can actually affect change. We did also, though, want to continue to assess employee engagement and align our cultural attributes with the outcomes that we were looking for as a business. We looked at a number of different surveys, and I'll tell you they were all very good and very effective, but what really focused us on Denison were a few things. It was incredibly easy to use, and the survey time was much less than, I'd say, about 15 minutes. We needed people to just sit there, take a few minutes, tell us what they were thinking, and this allowed us to do this. And although I joke with our colleagues at Denison, it did not require significant consulting help. Oftentimes, you can have these very complicated surveys that require a lot of support to interpret the results. And this was a survey that allowed us to get the information in a very easy way, to get some over-the-shoulder help from Denison, but to allow us within our organization to make it the responsibility of both HR, but more importantly, the leadership team, to understand and own the results so that we could make an impact. And then, obviously, more overall reasonable cost for us. So that all said, we had a pretty aggressive rollout plan. We wanted to do a pilot of the survey of about 500 randomly selected employees. We then wanted to get those results, assess those results, turn around a full survey to the organization, and then begin action planning about a month later, and you see here what that timeline looks like. And then once the results came back, using this change management model that I'm sure many of you have seen, we wanted to begin by sharing the results. And what was very different for us was we wanted to be very transparent about the results in a quick way. And the way to do that normally would have been to cascade the results through every level of leadership, and then months would typically go by before employees saw the results. And that was something very different, which I'll talk about in a second. But then to identify the gaps, and then have a change coalition that would help create this vision of change, drive action, and then, importantly, track progress. And in all of this, we had about a year to the next survey. And we'll see that comparison of the results from 2010 to 2011. So 2010 results, as you see here. For those of you not familiar with the Denison model, I think it's relatively easy to understand. And I have my colleagues online if this, the questions become more complicated. But essentially, you look at this, and we're looking at 4 quadrants. So if you look at the upper right corner where it's red, that is where you're setting strategic direction and purpose. What's the blueprint really for the organization? And have we defined a meaningful direction for the organization? Do we know where we're going? Does the company know where we're going? If you look at our results, this would suggest that there is some recognition of where we're going. And I would say we weren't really surprised by these results simply because we had changed the strategy, we had changed the vision, we were communicating all of this as late as February-March timeframe of 10, and these results were as a result of a survey taken in May. So not really that surprising, relatively pleased. We had done a lot of work at the senior levels with the direct reports to our senior team, so we would have expected those results to be higher. But for the most part for the organization, this was not that surprising. To the left of the model, where you see blue, this is around patterns and trends in the market. Are we able to translate and understand the demands of what the customer wants into action? Are we listening to the marketplace? This was interesting for us because it's relatively low, not very, very surprising, and I'll explain why in a sec, but we are in a very changing environment. So do we truly understand what the customer is looking for in this changing environment? Frankly, does the customer understand what they're looking for in this changing environment? So not surprising there. To the bottom right, where it's gold, you see consistency, where it says consistency. And that's really about, do we have the systems and structure in the organization to execute? Does our system really create leverage? Are we able to execute? And something that we do reasonably well under certain circumstances. And then in the green section, this is where we speak about involvement, ownership, responsibility as it relates to the employees. So while the upper right is about mission, are we clear in where we're going, the green is really about, is anybody following? So upper portion, you have external focus. Lower portion is really about internal execution in our employees. The upper is about strategy, strategic direction, and the customer focus. The right side being stability, the left side being flexibility. So what you see here is we're a really stable environment. We have been in business for a number of years. We have been really successful for a long period of time. But as the market changes and as the environment changes, are we poised to deal with that change in the market? So that's really what this basically says for us. So in looking at our results, we decided that we needed to focus on several areas. And first, let me tell you, as I mentioned a minute ago, the key areas that drive our high performance as it relates to our model here. I spoke about execution. We are phenomenal when it comes to reacting to an issue. So if there is a problem, we can pull together and we can solve that problem and do it incredibly well. We have principle-centered leadership. We often refer to ourselves as a business with a conscience. While we are a not-for-profit Blues plan, we are focused on success. We are focused on doing what's right for the customer, and we are very focused on the community and the external customer and the external member, if you will. And then short-term goals and objective focus. So we are setting these long-term goals, but we have always been very focused on the short term. We have been a leader in the market in North Carolina for many, many years. And with all of these changes, while we have been focused on the short term, how do we continue to focus on the long term in terms of changing the way we do business? So when we thought about the culture areas, it would have been very, very easy for us to suggest that we focus on any number of things. And it took a lot of, I would say, focus to pick only a few areas that we would work on. And we decided that with all the unknowns in the industry, we had to react differently to our competitors. And we thought that focusing on the areas which would help us most support our vision would be decision-making rights and process. We recognized that through our results and through feedback we heard that there needed to be more clarity regarding the authority to act. How do we really make a change so that people understand that they have the authority to act and they're empowered to do so? Enabling and creating change and innovation was obvious from the results. We know what we're dealing with in the market. We know that there are significant change that we as a business would be dealing with. And how do we create an environment of change, create a culture of change where people are poised and prepared to deal with the innovation that's going to need to occur in the market. And then coordination and integration, cross-enterprise collaboration. So how do we make sure that while we execute incredibly well and we come together as an organization across the enterprise when there's a crisis, how do we do that on a more regular basis? How do we make sure that there is collaboration enterprise-wide on all efforts? That said, what I would say is there were a couple of key enablers that were really necessary, and the first of which I would say was a very engaged senior leadership team. In order to truly change culture, it cannot be left to either the HR organization, the OD organization, the training organization. It needs to be owned, truly owned by the senior leadership team. And this senior leadership team spent an enormous amount of time dedicating themselves to culture change in the organization. We recognized that there was an urgency to shifting the way we thought to shifting the way we act. And our CEO often refers to himself as a man in a hurry. And that was clear to everyone. Everyone understood that we needed to clearly understand what the cultural beliefs were, what changes needed to be made to those, and to be able to really articulate what the expectations were of the organization. How do we truly as a team work together to lead change in this organization? And I would say to you that the senior team spent a number of hours in what we call these sprint sessions, such that we truly demonstrated our personal commitment in recognizing that every one of us own this. I've been in situations where the question to me as a senior HR person was, you know, how are you really going to make this happen? What programs are you putting in place? And if I'm honest, we were all momentarily probably feeling that and looking to me and my organization to doing that. But the CEO was very quick to say, this is about us as a senior team, and everyone was very much on board with truly changing the legend that existed and creating the new legend for the organization. The second really important enabler was transparency and creating action plans for the company so that leaders throughout the organization, so again, while senior team was very, very engaged and spent a lot of time on this, it couldn't be done just by us. It wasn't just about what we were able to do. So every divisional leadership team created a culture action plan. What are the things that they would do in their organization to understand, to ask questions, to spend time with people, to truly focus on these same three action areas. So while we could easily have said, everyone go off and create your action plans, we had everyone focused on the same three. Every senior team member, senior leaders through directors as well, had culture as part of their performance plan. So there was a responsibility in the performance plan that said this is as important as delivering the business in any other form or fashion. So while my responsibility as a finance person may be to get the financial reports out every month, my responsibility as a finance leader would be to focus on culture and make sure there was a plan to effectively move the needle. We have a number of enterprise leadership level meetings. So for example, we do things every month. We have meetings called leadership forums once a month with a certain level of leader. We have symposiums once a year where we bring all leaders in the organization together. We have a variety of other types of meetings, staff meetings and so forth with leaders. Every one of those meetings had some dedicated time to culture work so that we could keep the conversation going. And finally, and most importantly, the Denison results were posted on our intranet transparently. So as I said earlier, while we normally would have communicated the results in a cascading way, we chose this time to let the leaders know that the results were being posted, and they were posted so that if an employee had a manager who was not spending time on this, the manager understood that an employee could ask a question, and this happened pretty frequently where employees would say, I saw results of the survey that we did, what's that about? Can we have a conversation at staff meeting? So it was great to have that actually happen. So before I move on, let me just stop in case anyone has any questions.
Yeah, Farah, we've got a number of questions rolling in. The first is from Chris. Organizational culture is a relatively stable phenomenon. Engagement has greater variability. Why were you compelled to assess culture on an ongoing basis?
I would say to you, Chris, that we had spent an enormous amount of time on engagement. We had understood what people were saying to us and how engaged our people were in terms of their own work and the organizational work. We did not ignore engagement in this. In fact, we had a great partnership with Denison and asking them to continue to incorporate the questions around engagement that had been in our engagement survey for the past 10 years so we could continue watching the trend. But we did need to also understand what the cultural attributes were in the organization, because there was a lot of discussion about what culture was. And in fact, the survey results didn't necessarily align with what everything was being said, and we needed to make sure that we could continue to watch the change and the movement toward what we really wanted the culture to be. So I don't want you to think we took our eye off engagement. We, in fact, made the request and had a great partnership so that we can continue watching our trend of engagement going forward.
Great, Farah. We've got another question from Steve. You address innovation as one of the 3 key areas to address. What were key processes you put in place to drive change or implement innovation in the organization? The brainstorming piece is often the easy part. Shepherding innovation ideas through the culture is often the key challenge.
Yeah, and I would completely agree. For us, I mean, keep in mind I think I told you we did this survey, so we received these results in May. No, we received the results in about July. And we did the survey again just this past May. So I would say to you that we really just needed to begin the process of understanding what the issues were. But in terms of innovation, we have a number of, I would not necessarily say processes, but our strategy team is very engaged, and we have an innovation team. We're looking at an innovation lab right now as we speak as part of the information that we've received on this next survey. So you're right, we've just begun all the brainstorming processes, but we have not implemented sufficiently, I would say, innovation processes at this point yet. So we have begun the process of building those, and we will continue to do that going forward.
All right, we'll take one last before continuing on. This one's from Bradford. How is each leader's culture impact measured and monitored, and how is accountability managed to ensure each leader's motivation and success?
That's a great question. So in 2010, when we did the survey, we only focused on the corporate level results. So where we got into the leader responsibility and accountability was having them build a culture plan in their organization. So we did not have information last year on the results as it related to individual impact as it related to culture. In 2011, we have now broken the results down. When I show you the results later, you'll see that the corporate results improved, but this year we're sharing individual information with leaders on how their specific results for their departments play out so that they'll understand that. And then having those conversations, so the senior leader, for example, if I am working with one of my team members, I am looking at the culture results for each of those departments and then working with them individually on how to improve those results, and there is this responsibility for building plans in each of those various departments. In addition, we are about to roll out a 360 tool that is actually another Denison product that will align very specifically information around 360, so we'll get a very similar model for the individual in the same way we've gotten this. We'll have a better sense of what the individual's impact has been on the culture. Hopefully that helps answer that.
All right, thanks, Farah. Go ahead with the rest of your webinar.
Okay, so given all that, we've talked about communicating the results and putting all the information out there, but what I would say to you is there was a real tipping point here for us. So we were doing a lot of work on focus groups, on communicating, really understanding what the information was, but the tipping point, I would say, was the CEO's point of view that culture change was his legacy. He had information about the data. He understood what the challenges were in the business. He had spent, I would say, an enormous amount of time speaking with employees in small groups. He also challenged our employee networks, or employee resource groups as some companies call them, to come back to him with what they wanted the culture to look like, how customers and employees should describe our company in the future. And he had been doing a listening tour across the state to listen to both customers and providers. And this was, for him, his way of truly getting all this information. And he and I spent a lot of time together on this notion of, if this is truly your legacy, how do you make this about what it is you and your team want the organization to look like going forward? And in doing that, we spent time with him to have him describe his vision for the future, not only from a strategic business perspective, but culturally. And then we went to work in defining what those attributes were that we heard him talk about, and then showing employees how culture connected to both strategy and direction. And frankly, it needed to be clear and simple. We needed to communicate our direction to our employees. We needed to be able to connect the individual to the enterprise direction. There were a number of employee messages out there, and I say here that they were confusing because in some respects they might have been conflicting or duplicative. So, for example, while the company had a vision and a mission, many divisions and departments had missions and visions. We had a number of departments who had what we call their catchphrases, so that they could define for their employees what they wanted done. But they might have in some ways conflicted with these messages that we were sending from the CEO. So the senior team agreed and pretty much just stacked hands and said, we will eliminate all those messages. We will talk about where we're headed in a very simple way, and we will all speak about it in exactly the same way. We wanted to be clear about what this looked like, and again, not just speaking about the culture, but how does culture and people really connect to the overall mission, and how can we visually depict this so that it's in front of people's minds all the time. One of the things that we talk a lot about here is how you tell stories, and telling stories often can work very much to your disadvantage because people tell stories that are negative, that reinforce the culture that they believe that exists. So we would hear things like, well, we're very bureaucratic. Well, why are we bureaucratic? Because we keep talking about being bureaucratic. Instead of, there are a lot of things here that are very, very positive, and we need to talk about those. So telling compelling stories. As we continue to work on this change in our culture, how do we have people tell stories that reinforce and really enliven this culture that we're trying to create? So what you see here is this visual that we've used, and we refer to the future as our way forward. How do we take the enterprise, move it into the future, and how do I connect to it? So while this may seem very simple, this visual exists everywhere. So we have it on our intranet, we have it on our performance plan, and while I can't show this to you right here through this webinar, if you click on any of those banners, it would help people be reminded. So if I clicked on mission, it would take me right to the mission and describe in more detail what the mission is, the vision, the brand, the strategies, all the way down to the individual goals. So if an employee clicks on individual goals, it brings them to the template of their performance management tool that they can use. And by using our individual performance plan and incorporating all of these words in there, we continue to keep this top of mind. And the visual here is to depict that the employee population is really carrying us into the future with this way forward, the enterprise to me. So again, if you click on any of those people, you'd find the definitions of what it means to be caring, collaborative, created, or committed. And on the next page, you'll see our compass. We thought about this in terms of a compass because our way forward, a compass really is helping take us into the future. So it provides some direction depending upon what the issues are we're dealing with. So if you think about caring, we are, and we've always been known as a very caring company. And what we wanted employees to understand was caring isn't just being kind to the customer, for example, but it's truly being able to distinguish oneself through superior customer focus and being passionate about the work that we provide every day. And very, very importantly, a different way of thinking about it is it's not just about my work and being engaged in my day-to-day, but it's about being focused on the greater good of the organization and thinking about the enterprise. So if you look at committed, we have those three words there, and we have narrative that explains to people each of these various pieces. So committed, showing dedication to the best work that I can do and taking personal accountability by having courage to identify problems and create solutions for the organization and having a spirit to win. On the left-hand side, you see the creative and having a sense of urgency and looking for ways to simplify and continuously improve what we're trying to do as an organization. So having people begin to think about all of this. So this was our cultural compass in terms of how we were trying to very clearly articulate for people what this meant and what are the expectations that we have of each other on a daily basis. Along with all of this, which we're not going to share, we don't have the time to share with you today, was a video that our CEO did. And essentially, it's a video that has him, first of all, completely unscripted, describe for people what he's looking for from everyone in terms of being committed, what does it mean to be caring, collaborative, and creative, and having them hear directly from him so that everyone received this message in a single instance so that there was no miscommunication about what it meant. So we're on a journey. I mean, this is how I obviously think about this. You know, currently we are continuing to ensure that our employees understand and accept what we hoped would not become the 4 C's, but people talk about this in terms of the 4 C's. It's an easy way for everyone to remember it. To continue to have discussions about culture, we have opened up a number of discussion boards across the company, again, continuing to create a transparent culture where people are saying what's on their minds, essentially, and there are a number of them in the organization in each of the divisions, and a lot of great information's come up. People are being very open and honest about what their concerns are, and we're all leaders are responding, and I'm not going to say that this is without any pain at all, because there definitely is. I mean, it is difficult to move quickly from an organization that is not putting information out there to being much more transparent. But we are very, very excited and engaged with our employees and having the discussions. There's a lot more focus on aligning business strategy and ensuring that people understand what the strategy is. There is a lot of communication very quickly. We've put strategy leaders in front of employees at town halls. We have had a number of videotape sessions on the internet so that people can hear everything as it's occurring so that we stop this mindset of telephone, and you hear what you hear and then you communicate what you think you've heard, but having people have the opportunity to hear everything quickly. We've developed a new performance management tool to include what the 4 C's are and what the expectations are, and we're continuously reporting on our progress on all strategy metrics to the organization as opposed to just the leadership teams. So at this point, you know, you'd say, so what? What happened? Did the survey change? We did resurvey in June of 2011. And compared to what we thought was a high response rate last year, which I believe was about 83 or 84%, we had a 93% response rate in June of 2011, which my understanding is almost unheard of. So when we first heard what the response rate was, I'll tell you honestly, my reaction was, this can only be good or bad. They may really want to tell us what's on their minds, which is great, but it may not be what we want to hear. And you'll see here what happened to our results. There was a significant improvement across every dimension. When you look at the red section, while the color looks the same, the benchmark numbers went up. So compared to benchmark, we had significant improvement. Not really, again, surprising because there had been a lot more work done on this. We were very excited about the work that was done here. And in terms of the gold area, we were really excited about that because there have been a number of initiatives to ensure that we align divisions and put in place more common goals so that we are sharing responsibility and sharing the effort for getting things done across our divisions. And most importantly, besides what you see on the picture, is what you hear people saying. So the communication, the conversation is really changing. People can feel the difference when they say, you know, I feel that we're doing a better job in communicating with each other. There is better collaboration across the company. Are we there yet? Clearly, even the picture says we're not there yet. We're putting more emphasis, and again, some of the color looks similar, but there's a lot more emphasis on the customer and the market. There's a lot more transparency around what we believe the market is looking for and what we're planning to do about it. So a lot of those details are actually out there transparently in the company. And certainly team orientation and the focus on our employees feeling better about the willingness to follow where we're going. So earlier I said, you know, while red is where is it that we're going, the green is really about are they following. And what this would suggest is, yeah, they are following more often. So this is very positive. But again, you know, we're not celebrating completely yet. To the question about engagement earlier, you can see here the questions that we put in place. These were the very specific questions in our prior surveys about engagement. And our engagement score improved against benchmark. So last year, the improvement score, we were on a scale of 1 to 5, 4.06, and it improved to 4.12, which, according to the statistics, is statistically significant. So we were very excited about this because that's an improvement on that kind of a scale that one might not have anticipated. But importantly, every one of the questions improved as well. A lot more around my work energizes me because discretionary effort is very much about the work and the willingness I have to put into the work. So we want to make sure that we continue to work on that and what is it that could improve that. So that said, we met with our CEO, and while we were all excited because we did see improvement, and you always want to see that when you put as much effort as we did into this, his words to us were, we can't declare a victory, and he's absolutely right. We need to continue working. We can't have everyone take their eye off this because it is just too important to our success of really creating that strategy and that direction in the future. So by year end, we hope that we will continue to have the cultural transformation reinforced and embedded. Not sure that will actually be completely embedded. You know, this is something that has to be ongoing. But long term, we will continue to have our focus on being a market-driven company. There are many, many decisions that we have to make, but we will continue to communicate those in the context of our company vision and the way forward so people continue to get those connections. We want all employees at every level of the organization to truly understand what it means to be market-driven and performance-oriented. There is truly accountability and an understanding, and we need to continue to reinforce the what and the how. Getting the work done and getting the washout, as we say, is important, but how we get that done is equally important, and it is equally important against all levels of the company. Creating those barriers, or eliminating those barriers, rather, between leaders and employees is something that we continue to have to work through. having employees and managers engage with each other, having these discussions, aligning all the processes and aligning our strategy and our planning, making sure everything resonates with our employees. How is it that they're truly going to understand what we're doing? So given all that, I would say that it's been an exciting journey. We're at the beginning. We've been at this for about a year. I absolutely enjoy watching the development of this relationship with the organization that's going on. It's great to be out there and about. We've been out there and about so much that you're walking through the halls and employees will stop and give me ideas about things that we can do differently, and that is probably one of the most satisfying experiences I can have. So I want to thank you all for participating in this. I'd love to take questions if there are any, and I'll give it back to Tim.
All right, Farah, we have a number of questions. There were actually a couple related to your presentation kind of having an appearance of there being a little more top-down communication than bottom-up. So we've got a pretty thorough question here from Gary. Although well thought out by the senior team, it appears it has top-down diagnosis with much more telling people what to do next, limited participation and dialogue, and interpretation by top and 3 action areas selected. I would guess there was little energy from the bottom created in owning these results and what they mean. Can you comment a little bit?
Yep, that is a great point. And we spent a lot of time with people having that conversation, actually. The data is what the data is. So we wanted to focus on a couple of key areas. And so I would say that it was, in some respects, top-down in really deciding what we wanted everyone to really very much focus on. But I would say the understanding what it says in those key areas, there was a significant amount of communication from the bottom up. So if that didn't come across, then that's unfortunate. So I want to make sure that you understand we spent so much time doing focus groups with employees, and I would say, when I say we, meaning the leaders, sitting down, understanding what the issues are, getting them engaged in the solutions. So while we needed to understand, and we had to, at some point, given our time frame, really say, look, these are the things we need to focus on. We know where we're headed strategically, and this is what's going to help make us successful, but help us understand how that can actually be done. And I would say that there are a number of organizations within our company and departments within our company and people within our company that have absolutely latched onto this and created their own, what we're calling across the company, culture clubs to work on these various things. So I would say employees are very actively engaged, probably in some areas more than others, in some departments more than others, but very actively engaged in creating the solutions. So again, while tops down may have been, here's what we need your help working on, the bottom up is really doing the working.
Okay, we've got another question from Chris. How is the culture transformation journey being leveraged to equip leaders with tools for leading change?
That is another great question. One of the focus areas you see both last year and this year we're focusing on is creating change. We have built a change management capability in the organization and are, I'll say this loosely, but requiring all leaders in the company. And when I say leaders, I don't necessarily just mean people leaders, but there are leaders, both informal and formal leaders, depending upon the role they play in the organization, that are expected to truly understand and become role models for change leadership in the company. So one of the, that is one way that we're doing that, and we have begun that process, I would say, right before the survey rolled out. We began that, and it is being communicated pretty widely in the company. So while we're expecting certain people to do it, anyone can go through this process, and it's pretty extensive change leadership methodology that will become, which is, I would say, simple for people to understand, so everybody thinks about change leadership in all that we're doing.
Okay, and a question from Valerie. What is the measure of success for the culture workforce strategy?
Well, one of the measures of success for us this past year was the engagement score. So we actually have as one of our scorecard goals enterprise-wide an improvement in that engagement score. That was one very specific one, and we will continue to use that. Another is just the results of the survey. Another is, it's hard in some respects to absolutely connect the culture visual, if you will, to the business result. But what I would say to you is we are very much tracking the business results because we believe that as we continue to improve the culture and improve both how employees are following with the customer focus in the market, that our business results will continue to improve despite what's going on in the market. And that is truly one of the key measures of success for us.
Okay, and a question from Sarah. Was culture action planning, culture results linked to executive performance objectives and assessments?
Yes, absolutely. In fact, every senior leader has a very specific goal in their performance plan that requires them to not only create an action plan for their organization, but participate in a number of employee engagement activities. And you might think, well, if you had to put that in their goals, then were they not doing that? I would say there was absolutely active participation to a degree, but when you ask people to focus on something and you know they're going to be measured on it, there's always going to be a heightened sensitivity to, I need to get involved in these types of things. So everyone had it in their goals, and then everyone was expected to, moving down through the organization to hold their own leadership teams accountable for making that happen.
Okay, and a question from Patricia. In hindsight, is there anything you would have done differently, i.e. any key lessons learned?
I would say that as much involvement with the senior leadership team that we needed, with all of our meetings that we had, I probably would say that one lesson learned was we might have moved a little bit more quickly in engaging the employees. When I told you the story about the employee networks being involved and having the CEO, that probably happened a little bit later than I would have done it. So if I had to do it all over again, we would have begun those conversations with employees a little earlier. So for example, this year, when we received our results, very quickly we've engaged a number of people in the organization that were not people leaders. And because we have what we call our culture clubs, we know the people that are very passionate and engaged in this process, so we were able to engage them very quickly. And so I hope to see that differently this year. So I think the timing for us was I would have done a little differently.
And we have a question from Elizabeth. What are some of the initiatives that are being implemented to develop capability, or the capability development section?
We are working, again, first of all, as it relates to leadership capability, we are in the process of formalizing in a slightly different way our leadership development framework. That's one very important example that is in process. We are also putting together our what I would say is our performance management model. That was something that was really important for us to ensure that employees were engaged there in terms of capability development, because that's an important piece. And we're spending time this year. Capability development is actually one of the key focus areas for 2011 that we're working on into the next survey. So there will be a lot more discussion with employees on what that means. How do I create, or how do I really truly develop the skills I need to get my job done? We're looking at rotational programs throughout the organization. Empowerment is a big deal for us as well, and we're going to be spending a lot more time working on what does that really mean for people, and how do we provide people the tools and capability in order to truly feel as though they are empowered to make decisions. So that whole area of involvement.
Okay, we'll take 2 more questions here. This one's from Barbara. How are you integrating the multi-generations into the culture program?
Another great question. We are when I said earlier that we are, or we had used the employee network groups, one of the key groups, well, we have several, are what we call YOPRO, our Young Professionals Group, was the group that our CEO gave the assignment, if you will, to in terms of what is the culture that you want to see in the future, what does the culture look like today, and so on and so forth. That group then engaged the other employee network groups, one of which we call our Golden Blues, which is our over 50 group that has a significant amount of experience with the company. So we are looking at each of those groups. Ironically enough, when we spoke to those groups, there really wasn't a very different expectation of culture among the various generations. Where you see the generational differences has more to do with performance management, communication, how often they want to hear it, how quickly they want to hear it, and in what manner they want to get their information. So, for example, opening up discussion boards was something very much expected by our young professionals. So the Gen X, the Gen Y rather, the Gen Y group is very interested in having technology provide information to them. The Golden Blues were much more interested in having face-to-face meetings. So while I don't like to make generalizations, because I do think there's always a mix within those groups, we needed to create different ways to communicate with people as a result of their need from a generational perspective of getting their information. So that's just one example.
All right, Farah, this is our last question. Impressive work. What next to sustain or grow results?
The $64,000 question. What I would say, and my team and I actually just met this morning on this, and for us the really important next step is continuing to take this work out into the organization so that leaders understand it is their responsibility. And we need, as an HR organization, while we've been actively engaged with them, we need to step back into the background a bit and provide the support so that leaders really embrace this and are willing to take responsibility for making this change. And we have a number of different efforts that we are putting in place going forward. We're just beginning our process for communication. And we talked a little bit about leadership development. We've incorporated all of the culture, messages, and expectations throughout our training and development programs. Just as we had done several years ago with diversity, this is another piece that we're really focused on in terms of making sure we're all hearing those same messages, whether it's for a new hire through the onboarding process, or whether it's going through a training program, whether it's going to a staff meeting, making sure there's consistency in all of the messages to the organization. And we're hoping that all of this work continues to be successful and we continue to see improved results because it's an exciting time in this industry and we have a lot to do.
All right, Farah, thank you so much. We'll hope everyone will stay on the line for 1 or 2 more minutes. You're going to have a feedback window pop up and we'd really like some feedback on this webinar. Thank you so much, Farah, for this great webinar and all the support.
Thank you. It was my pleasure. Thank you.
For those of you listening out there, would encourage you to contact us if you're interested in learning more about this webinar topic or the Denison solutions. You can contact us at denisonconsulting.com. For those of you that submitted questions that we didn't make it to, we'll be sending those to Farah and hopefully getting some responses out to you. So thank you to all for joining us today. We'd like to wish you all a smooth transition into the fall and hope that you will join us for our next webinar, which will take place at the end of this month. Visit our website soon for more details on that upcoming webinar, and they'll be announced soon. Again, thank you very much, everyone, for participating.